What missing persons case is most confusing or doesn't add up? Story 1. I grew up in that part of North Carolina. I remember a billboard they put up with her picture. It was on my way to school, so I saw it pretty much every day when I was growing up. They updated it at some point with an age progression. Such a tragedy. I really feel bad for her parents. I can't imagine what it must feel like after all these years to still not know what happened and if she's still out there somewhere. I had a friend vanish about 10 years ago in Texas. She bought a drink to go to a waffle place, and car, purse, and all were found in the parking lot. Her remains were found 5 years later, chalked up to self-unaliving. Bothered me a lot the entire 5 years before they found her remains. And now the whole scenario bothers me, partly because she messaged me a few days before, but I was too caught in my own depression to respond for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to go with, as bad as that was, her parents went through a vastly worse experience. Just a reminder that you not responding because of your own depression and life circumstances does not make you at fault. And I hope you're not feeling guilty because of it. I knew someone who was struggling right as COVID hit. I saw her Facebook post, which was a post about having a hard time, and meant to respond, but didn't in that moment because things were absolutely bananas with COVID hitting when I was a senior in college. It was the week before and during when everything was starting to close on the East Coast. I looked at Facebook a few days later and found she had completed self-unaliving a few days after the post. I didn't know her well at all, but carried guilt for not responding for a long time. I guess I still carry some because I'm tearing up as I write this. Regardless of what happened to your friend, I hope you're able to find some semblance of peace too. Of course, her parents are in pain, but please don't discount your own pain. It's valid, and I can imagine very raw. I hope your friend's memory can be a blessing to you. I hope things are looking up for you. From one stranger to another, I've struggled with the same, and I just want you to know you're not alone, and the planet is absolutely a better place just because you exist. I wish both of the people we knew had known that. Hugs if you want, and my inbox is open. We've had a stellar couple years for old cases. Golden State unaliver getting caught, Delphi unalivers getting cracked open, Boy in the Box getting identified, Brittany Drexel's unaliver confessing. We might be around the corner from it. I think we will see this one solved in our lifetime. I'm trying to think back, and I cannot think of anyone close to me that has ever gone missing and then turned up, passed away. And I don't know. Have any of you ever had that happen to you? What is that like? I just cannot imagine having that loss and just going between hope of maybe finding that loss resolved and never knowing. Story 2. I live in Minnesota and have driven around that area. It's fairly remote. You can drive for miles and miles and see nothing but corn. So what confuses me is, why did he leave his car? It was dark in a large desolate area. I get that he was like 19 or whatever, but he couldn't have lacked that much sense. I'm thinking he had either some kind of crazy substance in his system, which I think is most likely, something was chasing him, or someone was making him walk out into the nothingness. It just doesn't make sense otherwise to leave your car when you've got your parents on the phone looking for you. One podcast I listened to also mentioned there were a couple of hours unaccounted for, so there was speculation that maybe when he ran off the road, he hit his head and blacked out for a bit, which then caused confusion. I feel like I remember hearing that his parents told him to start walking to them. They gave him a location, etc. But of course, it turns out that he wasn't even remotely in the same area as they were. He may have been confused as to where he was. I don't know. Thought maybe there's a reason he's walking. Apparently, he saw lights in the distance and thought he would walk to the town they were coming from after his parents, and he couldn't find one another. What's bizarre is that he told his parents that he thought he was near the town of Lind, which isn't even on the path from Canby to Marshall, his college to hometown. Canby is 30 miles northwest of Marshall. Lind is 7 miles southwest. Police speculated that he saw the light on top of a grain elevator in Taunton, near where his car was found, roughly halfway between Canby and Marshall. That's my understanding. Keep in mind that we don't know how intoxicated he was, and we also don't know if he'd just conked his head hard enough to add significantly to his disorientation and confusion. Talking about being near Lind might be more of a symptom of a head injury and or intoxication than just simply being lost. Also, one of the podcasts or something I'd listened to said that he seemed short, irritated, or frustrated, and that was slightly uncharacteristic for him. That also might be the alcohol and or a head injury more than simply being convinced he's near Lind and growing naturally frustrated with his parents' ineptitude. Very often, memory patients or patients with TBI will become frustrated, irritated, or even aggressive, and further lock onto their mistaken beliefs about what's happening instead of having the insight to step back and reassess competing or conflicting information, like getting angry with parents over not seeing them flashing their headlights and assuming they're somewhere in the wrong versus realizing that if they're where they say they are and flashing their headlights, then it's the patient who's most likely in the wrong place. I don't know what this is referring to, but that's all very weird. That sounds like something out of a thriller movie rather than some kind of real-life situation. And I don't know, maybe we'll find a story later on that matches the name to this story. Story 3. William Tyrell. In 2014, the 3-year-old boy went missing from his foster grandmother's yard whilst playing with his sister. His foster mother and grandmother were apparently watching them play outside, and the foster mother went inside to make a cup of tea. Then they noticed they hadn't seen or heard from him in a while and searched the house and yard. In 2021, police began searching national parkland near the grandmother's home for human remains. They also revealed that the foster mother and grandmother were persons of interest in his presumed passing. Earlier today, the foster mother pleaded guilty to assaulting another foster child that was in her care, 10-year-old girl. She's also been charged with intimidating and stalking a minor. Her husband has also been charged with the same crimes, but pled not guilty to all counts. The foster grandmother is now passed on. Basically, police believe that William expired whilst in the care of the foster family, and they disposed of his body to cover it up. Police are recommending that the foster parents be charged with perverting the course of justice and interfering with a corpse. His photos went viral at the time of the disappearance. He went missing whilst in a Spider-Man costume, and the photo that was distributed was taken minutes before. Edit. Forgot a word. It should have said that the foster father actually pleaded not guilty to the charges. A very similar thing happened recently in Hawaii. 6-year-old Isabella Kalua went missing from her bedroom in the middle of the night. The island went all out to look for her, but strangely, her family, they had fostered and adopted her, were not helping the search. After weeks of searching, investigators interviewed her sister, also a young child, and she told them she had witnessed her unresponsiveness. Their parents took her away, and she never saw her again. They were keeping the poor girl locked in a dog cage at night because she would get food from the kitchen because she was hungry. It was so heartbreaking, and those monsters still will not even say where they put the body so her birth family can have closure. That's just sinister right there. And in Hawaii, I don't know, it's maybe me not thinking things very complexly, but in Hawaii, it seems like there's not a lot of space where anybody could hide in that. But it seems like the family wasn't really hiding to begin with as far as their behavior. I think there was a recent case about someone being charged with child neglect for her own kids that kind of rings along with stories like these that just turn my stomach a bit. Story 4. Lars Middenk. This happened in 2014. Lars Middenk was a German tourist in Bulgaria. He went there with his friends. On the last night there, he got into a bar fight with other German tourists. He hurt his eardrum, and doctors told him not to take the plane home today to prevent more damage to his eardrum. His friends offered to stay with him one more night. He insisted it's okay for him to stay on his own and take a flight the next day, so he stayed on his own. Checking for a new hotel, he called his mom. He was telling her that he's feeling tracked. She told him not to worry because it's probably side effects from the pharmaceuticals the doctor didn't mention. He checked in at a new hotel around 10 p.m. At 1 a.m., his mom called again. He was still feeling tracked and told her he's going to leave the hotel because he's not feeling safe there. He never called his mom again. The last time he was seen was at the airport. He got checked by the airport doctor if he could take the plane. The doctor told him it's okay. In interviews, the doctor said Lars was very nervous and unrelaxed. After one security guy knocked the door and took a look inside, Lars got even more nervous. He left the doctor immediately. Security cameras picture him running out of the airport as fast as possible and climbing over a fence on the other side of the parking lot. Guy is still missing. I would put my money on psychosis, either due to an undiagnosed or emerging mental health condition or medication side effects. The story of how Middenk was injured is weird in its own right. He did get into a fight with the other German tourists as you described, but the fight was a purely verbal one. He subsequently went off on his own and only showed up with his injuries the following morning. He claimed he had been assaulted by a group of men hired by the other German tourists. While the assault was almost certainly real, as his injuries are undisputed, the idea that the other tourists would pay to have Middenk roughened up over a shouting match seems odd, although I suppose not entirely impossible. Interestingly, psychosis is a rare side effect of the antibiotic Middenk was put on for his ruptured eardrum, Cefprozil. His family believes he began to experience the side effect, became increasingly paranoid, and fled the airport as a result of this symptom. However, the airport doctor indicated there was no evidence Middenk had ever filled the prescription and started taking the Cefprozil. If that's the case, sudden onset of psychosis due to a mental health condition could also well be at fault, perhaps exacerbated by the stress of the assault. This could also better explain the unusual details Middenk reported about his assault. My best guess is that this is one of the rare cases where multiple unlikely events happen together. Middenk suffering unlikely contraindications from the pills, developing a psychosis which got intensified by him misinterpreting events at the airport, finally his panicking and fleeing the scene, and then probably running across people taking advantage of him, robbers, etc. None of this would on its own be newsworthy for anyone besides close family. In combination, it makes a bizarre and haunting case. Story 5. Brandon Swanson. He drove into a ditch and called his parents for help. They stayed on the phone with him for 47 minutes while they drove around looking for him. They heard him say, "Oh, Smeg," and then the phone went silent. They eventually found his car far away from where he said he was, but he was never found. Reading this was absolutely chilling. It seems at first glance that it's most likely he drowned, but that really doesn't make sense because the water was only 10 feet deep and they would have found his body. He just suddenly said, "Oh, Smeg," and the phone went silent, but he didn't hang up? The phone call continued with total silence from his end. What the frack happened to him? There's a theory he was walking around farmland and fell into an old well that may have been overgrown with weeds. That would explain the "Oh, Smeg" and why he hasn't been found. Unrelated, but one day a friend of mine got a call from her wife. She was in complete panic. She was lost and couldn't find her way home. My friend didn't hesitate. She left work and jumped in her car. She kept telling her, "Tell me what's around you. Describe your surroundings." She found her in an area only a couple miles from home. They took her to the doctor, and it turned out she had a brain tumor. She passed 6 weeks later. Man, it was horribly tragic. A few months later, her sister perished unexpectedly, and then, heartbroken, their father passed 3 months after that. I seriously don't know how my friend gets up in the morning. Story 6. Mary Lou Bostwick. She disappeared July 18, 1972 from Waverly, New York. She was dropped off by her dad to babysit at a friend's house. This was also her 16th birthday. Her mom stopped by later with a cake and presents. The people in the apartment told her that Mary never showed up. However, her bag was in the residence. Nothing else was ever found. There was another girl around the same age, Sharon Costin, who was abducted and unalived in a nearby town about a year later, October 1983 in Sayre, Pennsylvania. There was a man convicted of that, but he always denied doing anything to Mary. One of the people who testified against him and was given immunity was a suspect in Mary's case. Mary's mom thinks there's a connection, but nothing was ever really found. I've sadly never seen anyone cover her disappearance on any of the podcasts or YouTube shows. Edit. Everything I had posted in my original post was from my memory. I just want to add that she actually went to babysit on July 17. Her birthday was not until 3 days later. That was the day her mom stopped by. No one ever called her parents to figure out where she was. I don't remember if they ever shared the name of the family she was supposed to be sitting for. No idea who lives at the house. Her bag being in the house makes it even more suspicious. Right. The people in the apartment obviously know more than they're saying. The only thread I could think of to tug on in that case is the fact that the bag being in the house was indicative of someone in that house knowing what was up and that they're covering up. It's about the only thing I would have to go on, and if that were my kid, that's about all I would just hammer on too, probably to the point of being really annoying and persistent. Story 7. Paddy Moriarty and his dog Kelly went missing in an outback town in Australia with a population of 12 people. Last seen leaving the pub riding his quad bike the 1 kilometer distance to his house. He or his dog have never been found, and no one has been charged in relation to his disappearance. I love that in a town of 12 people they have a pub. I think a recent inquest found that he was likely unalived by his neighbor. Something about secret recordings of her gardener admitting to the crime. So, not definitely solved, but probably about as solved as it likely will get without a confession or body. Not just that, he made it home, put leftover barbecue chicken in the microwave for later, then left the house with his dog, probably to go for a walk? What the hell? 12 people? Somebody knows something.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 8. The Beaumont Children. 3 kids go to the beach, are seen with a mystery man, and never make it back home. Never found out who the man was or where they went. Their parents just recently passed without ever getting any closure. And the fact that the parents never moved house in case they came home. Edit. I should have fact-checked. The parents eventually separated and moved house. They stayed for a long while in case their children did come back, but after decades of them missing and the parents divorcing, they moved from the house. But they did keep the police updated on where they lived afterwards, just in case they came back. Not gonna lie, I thought you were describing Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events at first. Then I really looked at the name and just looked it up. I can't believe this. What a crazy case. This one has always stuck with me. I'm quite a bit younger, a lot, but my granddad ran a little beach cafe and kiosk on the beach for a long time. He didn't have the cafe then, but he was a prominent businessman in the area at the time. My mom and her siblings were around the same age. My granddad always tells us that they never had any reason to feel their kids were unsafe, but there was a big shift after that. My mom and her siblings would have been allowed to play at the same parks or beaches as these kids, and my grandparents probably thought nothing of letting them play alone. Story 9. Definitely this one for me as well. I can't help but wonder why a 9-year-old would leave her home in a raging storm in the middle of the night. It's interesting that the family specifically noted they didn't have the internet at their house, because the first thing I thought of was she was being grounded and was told to leave the house that night, despite the rain. They didn't have the internet, but she was deeply involved in basketball in her church, so I've always wondered if the grooming happened in one of those settings. Same. I went down a rabbit hole and read up on the case earlier this year, and I think she got groomed by someone close to her. She packed very lightly, and some of the clothing items she took with her was a red vest and her basketball uniform. She disappeared on Valentine's Day, and she thought that she'd change into her clothes to partake in holiday activities at her school and change into her uniform for practice right after. She also packed her house key with her, which makes no sense for someone who's running away from home. She most likely was told by someone to leave the house late at night and that she'd be dropped off at home or school in the morning, yet she sadly met a grisly fate. It sucks that there's been no new developments in a while, because I really think just one small thing can blow the case wide open. Story 10. Asha Degree. She went missing at the age of 9 from Shelby, North Carolina, United States. In the early morning hours of February 14, 2000, for reasons unknown, she packed her book bag, left her family home north of the city, and began walking along nearby North Carolina Highway 18 despite heavy rain and wind. Several passing motorists saw her. When one turned around at a point 1.3 miles, 2.1 kilometers from her home, and began to approach her, she left the roadside and ran into a wooded area. In the morning, her parents discovered her missing from her bedroom. No one has seen her since. This one confuses me the most because when they found her book bag, it was wrapped in plastic twice. Maybe because of the rain? To me, this isn't a thing a 9-year-old would think to do, though. Yeah, after making that comment, I went and read the Wikipedia page, and this case is so messed up. Important detail is the bag was found a year and a half later at a construction site 26 miles from where she disappeared, with a mystery shirt inside it that did not belong to her. Current theory is she was abducted after running into the woods. Very sad. The whole thing is just sad and confusing. And it was her parents' anniversary, too. I wonder if she got it in her head that she needed to buy them a present. My brothers walked or hitchhiked into town around that age to get birthday presents, also to play at the arcade. Kids can get locked in on funny logic. There's a theory that she was lured out by someone under the guise of getting a present for her parents. The way she left was so calculated. She had a bag packed, she waited for her dad to get home and check on her, then she left in the middle of the night during a rainstorm. It just doesn't make sense. Story 11. Marshall Awasa, good guy, came back to his hometown to visit his family and friends. Everything, by all accounts, was good. Left to take the 2-hour drive to where he was living and never made it. Instead, it was recorded he spent the entire night trying to get into his storage unit, and then nothing. A week or maybe more, his truck was found 12 hours away on a back road in the middle of the woods, burnt to a crisp with belongings thrown about everywhere. No sign of Marshall, and from what I remember, the family was adamant that some of the things inside the truck, burnt or not, were missing, things they knew he had. The truck was even missing parts. It's been 4 years and there's never been an answer. It makes me sad and fearful of long travels. From what I know of him, he was a fantastic friend. I hope they get closure one day. Wasn't that the one where there was evidence that someone might have been trying to force him to enter the storage unit? Like he'd entered the wrong code deliberately or something? Story 12. Susan Powell went missing from her home. West Valley, Utah on December 6, 2009. She is presumably passed away. Her husband Josh was the main suspect in just a real piece of work. No one knows what really happened to her. Sadly, in 2012, Josh unalived their kids and committed self-unaliving after Susan's parents gained custody of the kids. This case is so frustrating since his brother and father are both gone too. We'll never know what happened to Susan, but I'm positive she's in an old mine shaft somewhere. Curse Josh Powell. His brother committed self-unaliving too, didn't he? He knew and or helped. I bet knowing his nephews perished because he didn't come forward ate him up. In a doc about the case, not sure which one, I could try to find out, it was explained that nearby their town are lots of abandoned mine shafts that are hundreds of feet deep, and some of them are too dangerous to search because they could easily collapse. He most likely threw her body down a mine shaft that sadly will never be explored. Story 13. Javier Dupont de Ligonnès. The whole family, parents and 4 kids, went missing overnight in 2011. Employers, school, and family received weird letters informing of their absence or departure. One of them saying they're going into a witness protection program. 2 weeks later, they found the corpses of the mother, the kids, and the dog hidden behind the house. They investigate and retrace the father's whereabouts in the south of France. He was last seen leaving a hotel a few days before. The region was thoroughly searched, but he was never to be found. Family annihilators are one of the vilest types of unalivers, in my opinion. The sheer selfishness to unalive everyone else and not yourself is astounding. I think they did one episode in a Netflix true crime series about that one. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, it was an episode of the new Unsolved Mysteries last year, I think. Story 14. Terrence Williams disappeared in 2004. He is the subject of a fascinating podcast called The Last Ride. The short version is that he was taken into custody in Naples, Florida after being pulled over in the early hours for traffic violations. He was never seen again. The deputy that pulled him over tried to conceal the traffic stop even from his own organization, but staff opening a local business saw the whole thing. When the sheriff's department finally looked into it, they discovered the deputy was involved in a similar disappearance of a man named Felipe Santos in 2003. To this day, the deputy claims no knowledge of Williams' whereabouts, despite being caught out in a series of lies. Story 15. Derek Seehausen. My friend was dating him at the time of his disappearance. He was actively planning his future in medicine and was last seen in San Diego. I saw him about 2 weeks before he disappeared. Please send any tips. Edit. 2 months. Edit. Super nice guy. Please share. Upvoting so that this hopefully gets further up. I really hope you hear something. If there's any other info, maybe what he was wearing, things like that, that'd probably be good to add.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.